If your travels ever take you to Atlanta, there's a spot I always recommend. A popular Persian restaurant called Dalbar. They make incredible dishes from across the region. And yes, Adana Kebab is on the menu. Recently, a local reader reached out and asked, how would you make it at home? And I thought, challenge accepted. Because this is something I grew up eating, a dish that is not just traditional, but one of the most beloved and iconic kebabs in Turkey. And while the authentic method involves hand mincing meat with a special curved knife, I'm going to show you how to make a home-cook friendly version that still gets you incredibly close to the real thing. We'll talk about the meat, the spices, how to shape it, and of course how to serve it, right down to the sumac onions and lavash. Without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk ingredients. If you do a quick search online, you'll find Adana Kebab recipes loaded with all the usual suspects. Onions, garlic, peppers, cumin, coriander. But in preparation for this video, I reached out to a friend who's actually from Adana, and he owns a kebab restaurant. And get this, they only serve Adana kebab. He told me that the authentic version uses just a few ingredients: lamb, tail fat, finely chopped, lightly sweet and spiced red pepper called kapya, red pepper flakes, usually or for chili, salt and black pepper. Surprising, right? No garlic, no onions, no sumac, no cumin. I mean, I personally can't think of a kebab recipe without at least one of those aromatics. But then again, I love authentic Adana, so I thought, you know what? Let's stick to the original. So my version follows the traditional recipe with just one exception, the meat. And yeah, you might be thinking, wait, isn't that the most important part? You'd be right. But hear me out. The authentic version is made by chopping lamb meat and tail fat using a curved knife called a zırh. You basically take lamb shoulder and fat, usually at about a 70-30 ratio, and chop them back and forth until the mixture is almost like a paste. In a way, you're grinding the meat yourself. As you cut, the meat and fat bind naturally, so there's no need for extra spices or fillers, and it's all about texture and balance. The flavor relies heavily on the natural richness of the meat, the smokiness from the grill, and the heat from the chilies. With all that being said, even as someone who cooks for a living, I don't own a zırh, that curved knife I mentioned earlier. And good luck finding lamb tail fat at your local grocery store. So to adapt the recipe for home cooks like me, I use store-bought ground lamb. Yes, it might not be fully authentic, but the end result is very close to the original and with healthy effort. Now, I can almost hear you saying, do I have to use lamb? Can I use ground beef or a mix of both? And that brings me to the most important part of the recipe, the thing that makes it so ridiculously delicious: fat. The answer is yes, you can absolutely use ground beef or a half and half mix of beef and lamb. But here's the key: you need fat. Fat doesn't just bring in flavor, it helps the meat bind together and stay on the skewer while it's grilling. It is what gives Adana the signature juicy texture and keeps it from falling apart over the heat. Since lamb is naturally fattier than your beef, your Adana kebab will be more flavorful and less likely to fall apart during grilling. If you're using ground beef instead, it is imperative that you make sure it's fatty. Think of a close ratio of 60-40. Leaner beef just won't hold up well on the skewer. It'll crumble, dry out, or both. If you're buying from a butcher, ask for a ground chuck with extra fat or see if they can add in beef fat trimmings. For my recipe here, I'm using 2 pounds of ground lamb, which is ideal for 6 servings. Now that we've covered the meat, let's talk about the aromatics, starting with the red pepper. The original recipe uses a Turkish red pepper called kapya. It has a slightly sweet and smoky flavor, and it's a classic in Adana-style kebabs. Sadly, here in the US, I cannot find kapya, so I use red Fresno peppers instead. You can also use a small red bell pepper if that's what you have on hand. The most important thing here, remove the seeds, keep some, chop it very finely, really finely, and strain out the juices. We don't want any extra moisture in the mix because a wet pepper will make your kebab meat soggy and prone to falling apart. As for the rest of the seasoning, we're keeping it simple: paprika, red pepper flakes, kosher salt, and black pepper. Now, if you're wondering, can I add onion, garlic, maybe some cumin, coriander, or sumac? You absolutely can. And if you go in that route, make sure to remove as much moisture as possible. The key is to keep the meat mixture firm enough to hold on to the skewers. We'll give the kebab meat a good mix, making sure all the seasoning and chopped peppers are evenly distributed throughout. If you have the time, cover the mixture and let it rest in the fridge for a few hours or even overnight. That extra time helps the flavors meld and gives you an even better texture later on. On to threading. I highly recommend investing in flat white skewers like these. They're not just traditional, but they're functional as well. The wide, flat shape helps hold the meat in place and keeps it from spinning or sliding off as it cooks. I got mine from Amazon and I will include the link below, but if you're shopping elsewhere, look for skewers that are at least 1 inch wide. That width makes a big difference in helping the meat cling to the skewer as it grills. The set I'm using today comes in 3 pieces and they're pretty long, but no matter how many skewers your set has, we'll divide the meat into equal portions so each one gets threaded and cooks evenly. To thread, we will grab 1 portion of the meat and shape it into a ball. Then we'll place it toward the top third of the skewer, gently press to engage it with the metal, and then start spreading it down the length of the skewer. As we work, we'll turn the skewer gradually, using one hand to press and shape the meat so that it is evenly thick on all sides. This part doesn't need to be rushed. Take your time to smooth it out and make sure the meat feels secure. I'll be honest, it takes a bit of getting used to, but once you do the first one, it gets easier. To prevent sticking, just dip your fingers in a little water as needed. A light touch is all you need. We're not soaking the mixture, just keeping your hands damp enough to work with it. Once the meat is fully shaped, we'll gently press and seal the top and bottom edges where it starts and ends on the skewer. This step is important in that it helps anchor the meat in place and keeps it from breaking apart as it cooks. Now for the ridges, we'll use our thumb and forefinger to lightly press along the length of the kebab, making shallow indentations every couple of inches. Then we'll rotate the skewer and repeat the same motion on the other side. Now these ridges aren't just for looks. They help the kebab cook more evenly and give it that signature texture and shape. Before grilling, I like to cover the kebabs with stretch film and set them aside while we work on the 2 other key components of a traditional Adana kebab: sumac onions and lavash bread. Let's start with the onions, because honestly, this might be the easiest part of the entire recipe. We'll slice up a medium red onion and place it in a bowl with 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 tablespoon of sumac, 1/4 teaspoon of Aleppo pepper, or Urfa chili if you have, or red pepper flakes, and 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley. Then we'll gently massage the mixture by hand until the onions soften just slightly. That's it. Set it aside and let the flavors do their thing. Now for the bread, to stay true to how Adana kebab is traditionally served, we're making lavash. If you're not familiar with it, lavash is a thin, soft flatbread that's usually used to wrap the kebab or serve it underneath to soak up all those amazing juices. You can absolutely buy lavash at the store, but I love making my own. And if you want to do the same, I've got a separate video showing you exactly how to make it step by step. I won't walk you through it for the time's sake, but I will link it to that video so you can check it out. If you're making this meal for your family, I recommend preparing the lavash while the meat is resting. It is the perfect window to get everything ready to serve. Alright, on to grilling. We'll preheat the grill to around 425 to 450 Fahrenheit. Once it's hot, we'll give the grates a good scrub and then brush them with a bit of olive oil to help them prevent sticking. Then we'll carefully place the Adana kebabs directly on the grill. You'll want to turn them often, every couple of minutes, to make sure they cook evenly and get that beautiful char on the side. Also, because the meat has a high fat content, you might see a few flare-ups, and that's totally normal. Just stay close to the grill, and if the flames get a little too excited, you can always adjust the heat or move the skewers onto a cooler spot. The whole grilling process should take 9 to 12 minutes, not much more than than that. Now, let me share a few hard-learned lessons from my testing phase. There was a moment while I was grilling my kebabs and they started falling apart. And here's what I figured out. That usually happens because of two reasons. One, your meat doesn't have enough fat. If one of my earlier tests, I was using a mix of lamb and beef and didn't realize just how important the fat ratio was. And two, if you don't properly seal the ends of the kebab, when you're threading it, it can loosen up and break apart once it hits the heat. Once I paid attention to those two things, fat content and end sealing, I didn't run into that issue again. If that happens to you, don't stress, learn from it, adjust and try again. Once they're cooked to your liking, juicy, tender, and just a little smoky, take them off the grill, cover loosely with foil, and let them rest for 5 to 10 minutes before serving. Alright, let's assemble. Grab a piece of fresh lavash, laid out flat, and carefully slide one of those juicy kebabs right on top, with meat and all those flavorful juices. Then top it off with a generous handful of those bright and tangy sumac onions, and finally add a few halved cherry tomatoes on top for a little coolness and extra texture. We'll roll it up while it's hot, and that way the bread soaks in juices, the onions soften just slightly, and everything comes together in one perfect bite. This is how we serve Adana kebab in Turkey. Simple, bold, and meant to be eaten right away. You can serve this with a cold glass of ayran. It's that salty, tangy yogurt drink we love in Turkey, and it goes perfectly with the richness of the kebab. If you've never made it before, I got a video for that too. I'll drop that link below. I'm including all the recipe links I mentioned in this video below so you can treat your family with a special meal. And if you do end up making it, tag me on social media. I'd love to see your creations. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. But in preparation, and good luck finding lamb tail at your grocery. I'm sorry. Recipe for really? I cannot talk. That's it. I cannot talk. If you do and if you